pulled this conference together. But for the next 45 minutes, she's going to be a speaker and share some wonderful information with us. We spent the morning learning about different types of learners, and I've seen heads nodding and people recognizing from George's talk and some of what Tom said what's going on. Katerina has been involved in the development of materials that will help people outside this room understand that. And today she's going to focus on one particular part, the emotions and learning piece for this presentation. I won't go into her biography much except to explain briefly that she came to this field, as many of us do, in a circuitous route, studying language and studying international languages, something I didn't know. She did a lot of her work in German and comparing that with the acquisition of other languages, learned when it worked, when it didn't work, and problems with language acquisition led her to her doctorate in developmental psychology and cognitive science from Cornell. She has a strong research background, and she's now working as the president of IDL, as well as about 5 other hats that I think we all can understand. So I'll turn it over to Katerina.
Thanks so much for that nice introduction. I thought I would take, some of you have seen the overview video to Walking the Path, and I feel like many of you haven't. What IDL did with some help from the Horizon Foundation a number of years ago, and also some support from Howard County Public Schools, is we produced a video that includes 2 DVDs. They each run about 60 minutes, not total. They're broken down into 10 to 20-minute segments that deal with basically the themes you've been hearing about yesterday and today. The idea for this conference was to sort of have a Walking the Path conference and have the topics come at you live, including the student panel that you saw yesterday. So the students that you saw on the student panel are in this video. There are experts in the video, including Mark Mahone, who's a neuropsychologist.
We can't hear you.
You're having a hard time hearing
Yeah,
me?
make sure can everyone hear her?
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, we're missing stuff. So.
Hold it closer to your mouth.
Okay, sorry. Is that better?
Yes.
All right. I was just describing the video a little bit more for folks and what we tried to achieve there. We have Howard County students who've gone through the Howard County Public School System or are currently in it that were interviewed, and Howard County Public School teachers and counselors that talk about their experiences and interactions with students, as well as parents and some experts who participate as well. What I'm going to do now is show you the 10-minute overview of the video, which some of you are maybe seeing some of the pyramids on the table. 2 of these pyramids, Julie Kuhn, who was on our student panel yesterday, you'll see her photography there. She did the photography for the opening scene here. I had a whole bunch of lovely young people help me, somewhere in 2006, I guess it is now, put this together with the sound and the images. Some of the young gentlemen loved the fire and blowing up fire and stuff. Anyway, you'll see some of the metaphors in here, and you'll see a lot of George Lynn in the video. So I think it's important to watch this. And what I thought I would do is go through the module on emotions and learning, which is one piece of the teacher training and professional development. There are about 6 modules in the whole package, and we've got information outside about it for those of you who are interested. So let's take a look at this, and hopefully all the technological pieces will work.
Can we turn off the lights so we can see?
It's not the lights, it's those windows, and unfortunately they do not close. We've closed almost every window, so hopefully it'll get better.
A woman carried 2 large pots of water from a river up the hill to her house every day. One pot had a crack and always leaked half its water out before arriving at the house. The other pot always delivered a full portion of water after the long walk from the river. Finally, after years of arriving half empty, the miserable cracked pot apologized to the woman. "I'm sorry that I couldn't accomplish what the other pot did," the woman asked. "What do you have to apologize for? After all this time, I still only deliver half my load of water. I make more work for you because of my flaw." The woman smiled and told the pot, "Take note of all the flowers growing on the side of the path where I carried you. The flowers grow so well because of the water you provide."
Welcome. I'm WWWBoser. In this presentation, we're going to be looking at ways to accelerate achievement for twice exceptional learners. All teachers share a common goal: to educate their students, nurturing and leading them to success. Just as teachers are all individuals, so too are their students. Finding the right tools to achieve success in each individual learner can be a huge challenge. The complexities of the teacher's task in today's diverse and inclusive classroom cannot be understated.
Teaching effectively to a heterogeneous population of different learners requires a variety of skill sets. Few classroom teachers are given the opportunity to acquire these skills in their training. Resources are often scarce, limiting the availability of adequate classroom support. Understanding and identifying the barriers to learning is the first step to knowing what resources are needed. Paradoxical characteristics are the hallmark of students who are the focus of this presentation. Although some may never receive a formal diagnosis, the many labels or diagnoses associated with such students include SLI, specific language impairment; ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder; EFD, executive function disorder; ASD, autism spectrum disorder; dyslexia; ODD, oppositional defiant disorder; GTLD, gifted learning disabled. The term that is most appropriate for this type of student is twice exceptional. The term twice exceptional refers to the paradox of a child's disabling weaknesses and coexisting superior strengths. Identification is often very difficult. While external physical differences such as eye color are relatively easy to observe, internal differences such as intellectual ability are much more difficult to detect. Identification is complicated by the fact that so often the child's gift may mask their weaknesses, or a weakness can overshadow inherent talent. American psychologist George Lynn has described the notion of genius as referring to an unconscious pattern in the personality that guides a person toward the fulfillment of his or her particular potential. Its character becomes known in a child's special interests, capabilities, vulnerabilities, and dreams. Described this way, genius is one's creative guiding spirit, or genie.
Many twice exceptional children have a deep and driving need to pursue their personal and unique genie or passion at any social cost. These children take on the role of being system disturbers, disturbing the way it's always been, challenging assumptions, answering each question with a new question, and refusing to be passive learners. Others may appear to behave and follow social and educational expectations, and yet they feel their difference silently and through other forms of alienation and isolation.
Society admires from afar the great talent and achievements of the world's greatest scientific and creative minds. However, based on what is known of their learning experiences, these are not necessarily the kinds of students who were easy to teach. These personalities, with a strong potential for failure, had the stamina, drive, and perseverance to overcome early learning challenges. For some, the support of a family member or mentor was also crucial to their success. It is impossible to count the cost to society of those brilliant minds who were not able to overcome their challenges.
The puzzling paradox of often conflicting strengths and weaknesses can be confusing and frustrating for all involved, but most especially for the students. Like the surface of this lake, all may appear calm, but like the rushing waters that feed the lake, underneath, the child may be in turmoil. In nature, plants and animals will do what they can to protect themselves from the harsh elements of the environment. Similarly, Twice exceptional children, who may experience a lot of negative feedback early on, may develop self-preservation mechanisms in order to survive.
Like the dragon, they fiercely guard their treasures, masking their gifts behind emotions that hide their embarrassment or shame. They may even refuse to cooperate with those who would like to help. Parents, teachers, and mentors must find a way to help the child manage the dragon, to recognize his or her own unique treasures. The child's powerful internal dragon energy needs to be channeled toward this positive goal or risk destruction by fire. A strong emotional connection is possible by developing greater awareness and understanding of each individual child's unique needs. Building trust with the student and encouraging the child's independence leads not only to unmasking of talents, but to the necessary self-confidence and emotional stability for eventual success.
In a complex interplay between genetics and environment, researchers have discovered familial links in the expression of the psychological diagnoses most associated with twice exceptional students, such as ADHD, dyslexia, autism spectrum disorder. Without proper awareness and intervention, parents are often at a loss for answers. Even the most informed parent may show frustration, anger, or even shame at their inability to cope with such a complex challenge. Parents and teachers must work together to achieve their common goal, collaborating to implement and reinforce positive, successful strategies in both the classroom and at home.
As a society, we have made huge progress in the last 2 decades in our understanding of neurobiology, the brain, emotional intelligence, and basic principles of learning. The field of cognitive science, for example, has made many sophisticated advances in our knowledge of human behavior and learning mechanisms. This knowledge is yet to be systematically integrated with teacher training and curriculum development.
The goal of this set of materials is not only to provide research-based information about all kinds of different learners, but also to change prevailing ideologies and myths perpetuated by labels that too often lead to narrow thinking and limiting stereotypes. During the course of this training, you will be encouraged to communicate more effectively with other teachers and staff, as well as parents and with the students themselves. You will be challenged to develop the tools and skills you need for early identification, accommodations, and to accelerate achievement for twice exceptional learners. Most importantly, as part of your training, you will be given an opportunity to collaborate with your colleagues to develop specific strategies for specific individuals at your school. The team approach ideally includes the broadest possible spectrum of individuals who truly know and engage with the student in a variety of settings.
Sorry. Almost over. There we go.
One of the most important aspects of teaching is to better know the student. Experienced teachers have learned that the most important goal is not teaching the content, but rather teaching the student. Developing a better sense for the student's perspective will enable you to initiate teaching strategies to handle all kinds of different learners.
Okay. So I think that. Okay. Thank you. I
I just thought I would show that introduction and for details on the rest. Can you, how do I do this?
Just hold it close.
Just hold it close. How's this? Is that going to work? When I move my head?
You turn it up a little on the side.
I think the closer she is to the box, the better.
Sorry. As loud as it goes. You'll just have to shout out if I'm not. Is this better or worse?
Now flip it.
Okay, now, good, okay. All right, so what I thought I would do is talk about the component of this, huge component, most important component, about how to understand learning and emotions in this population. And what I wanted to start with is a poem. We ended with a poem with George, so we're going to start with a poem. Some of you have this poem on your table. I'm a bored dreamer confiding in books. I ponder at the grass, trees, plants, and animals and wonder at their meaning. I hear the soft rustling of trees in winter shaking the cold white snow from their withered branches. I see a face watching me through the ever-changing tide of leaves in a storm. I want to live a life without fear, contempt, or injustice. I'm a bored dreamer confiding in books. I pretend to be normal, holding in my strange feelings so I can fit in. I feel like an abandoned hero, lost and alone. I touch the pages of books as they softly speak to me, explaining the meaning of their story. I worry that my life accomplishments will be of no consequence to those around me. I cry for all the hate and unnecessary deaths in the world. I am a bored dreamer confiding in books. I understand that Earth is just a tiny speck compared to the rest of the universe. But I don't see why that should discourage anyone. I say live, it's just a word. It's our actions that make it come alive. I dream that one day we will respect who we are and where we came from. I can't read this without crying. It's hard. Sorry. Stop. Okay. I'm like Julie Kuhn was yesterday. I mean, I should have done this. This is my son's poem.
You're kidding.
I wanted to start with something really personal, and you can see that that maybe wasn't such a good idea. My son doesn't express these kinds of emotions. If you were to meet him, you would have no idea. The part about pretending is huge. And when I was thinking about the students that sat here, the student panel, and what I've experienced from interviewing students and working with this population, is I went through and I thought of what are the emotions here? What are the emotions that we experienced yesterday? And I came up with a list of those emotions, and I thought we would start with that and see what we can do and where we can go. I'm sure a number of you who were in the room yesterday were thinking, well, how can we change this? You know, has everyone experienced this? What am I doing in my classroom to make sure that the student doesn't feel this way, that these emotions are not, you know, it's a crime for that kind of emotion to have to be sort of lived through or undone. So what can we do to prevent those? So what are the themes? You heard these yesterday, so I wanted to connect them with the students that you saw. You heard George talk about nature in the very beginning. You see this connection to nature and being outside. My son loves ecology and drawing and being out in nature. That will always kind of change. The sense for meaning and connection to the universe. We're but a tiny speck, but that's okay. You know, but these are children that think about the big picture, and they worry about these things. They worry about, some of them are very concerned about death and destruction and war. And these images, because they connect to meaning so much, they're going to connect to those things. So we need to be aware of that. Worrying about his accomplishments will be of no consequence. and I'll express myself in any way I can. Gosh, I think that's so powerful. Allowing the students to express themselves in any way they can so that we can lift them up and help them feel good in any way they can. The pretending to fit in, you heard Julie talk about that. Nobody wants to be feeling like they can't do like everyone else. And these guys are clever. So they're going to just pretend everything's okay. So how do we know that they need help? How difficult is that for a teacher? To me, that's really the hardest thing, for a teacher or a parent. If I don't know what the problem is, how can I start to help until it's too late, right? I think that's one of the big problems. And wanting others to like him for his quirks and errors. Errors. He calls it errors. I have errors. Jonathan Mooney talks about we have to make kids feel like they're not broken. And we have to drive that point home. Spencer gets it. I'm taking it back to the student panel. Spencer said, there's really nothing going on with me. You know, not that he's in denial. You know, he's like, look, I know what my challenges are, but I'm not broken. Okay? So I'm looking at these big themes, and I'm trying to relate them, because we can only, you heard George talking about empathy, and being able to empathize when you have had the same experience, when you've been there before. Lack of understanding or frustration. So we've all had those experiences, but when you think of kids who are in this situation, or who are different learners and who experience that frustration more and more frequently, you've got to put yourself in those shoes and understand that their behaviors and frustrations are not personal to you, but they're going to be out there. And I love George's spider on the face image. I'm going to do that because the emotional balance is just right there. It's right in your face. It's hard not to react to a poem like that, right? It's hard for me not to get pushed and then to talk to you about it. So let's talk a little bit. Here are some of the, I use this in the section on this to talk about the strengths and the possible problems. So we've got strengths, and right next to them we have the problems. Sensitive to peer criticism, frustrated over lack of time to do all the great things they want to do. It's a strength and it's a weakness. A sense of humor, but gosh, we get a little carried away sometimes. Okay? Intense efforts together with frustration or disrupting others. A lot of this is kind of familiar now, so I'm going to go through it quickly. The boredom and the resisting things that are not of interest. And you heard Tom West express it so nicely, that it's the things that are of interest that we want to get them to pursue and to try. Maybe seen as rude or domineering. Again, we see it in Asperger, but also in ADHD. We see it in a lot of kids where the rudeness kind of, because they appear like the little know-it-all. And that's why I like the term abandoned hero. And I want you to think about that. That's why I think the poem kind of gets at that. So what twice exceptional children experience is one day they're like the best, or in one subject, they're like the best in the class, they're getting A's, pluses, and they're way beyond it. And then the next day, they can't read the page when the teacher calls on them to read the page, or they haven't handed their homework in, or they've messed up, they've got errors. So that back and forth, that's kind of that's the abandoned hero. He's a hero one day, and then he's abandoned the next. So that little phrase right there kind of captures the emotion of what a child like that goes through. Again, rejecting what's already known. I already know that. And then again, there's the pretending to, I got that. Quick rush through things. You all see that, right? I can do it. Nope, got it. How do you get, and then they don't want to be told what to do, so how do you get the information in there? That's where those gaps come in, right? So it is a tough situation for a teacher or for a parent. Okay? So what are we going to think about today? Emotional social characteristics. I'm squeaking. Which we're getting at. And we're going to talk a little bit about emotion in the brain. This is kind of my area of it's brain and neuropsychology that I have a background in, so I like to take things back to the support for what we're thinking about and how we can address the problem. Okay? And then we're going to talk about what is the myth of laziness? And what's the research on effort? Where does that term learned helplessness come from anyway? A lot of people don't necessarily know what we're talking about there. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about how you develop that relationship, how to work with praise and feedback, and how that connection can work. And some of that may be repetitive for some of you. But I think starting off with, the support piece is a good way to go. Okay, let's talk about the brain and emotion. We've got emotion, then we're paying attention, or we're not paying attention, and then learning takes place. Very important to understand that what's going on at the periphery at that arousal level is going to be your gateway to getting up to the cortices, okay? The main point. Oh, sorry about that. Let me see. Do you hear me? This is from Linda Krieger-Silverman's book, Visual Spatial Learners. And the right answer would be, because he's not listening, right? When we're talking at that level. Okay, so we have the limbic system, okay, that includes the amygdala, which is sort of the seat of emotion in the brain. It has the power to open or close access to the cortex. Okay, this is a nice little, here's, I'm German by the way, so George's talk about Prussians, I love it. My first language is German, and my father's a physicist, and I grew up in this kind of interesting family. So she's German, the woman who came up with this. Anyway, that's an aside. Okay, so we have the emotional stimulus, that's the arousal. We've got the thalamus and the amygdala, that's the limbic system, that middle part there. And then there's the cortex. The thalamus is a relay station. It says, is this good or bad or deadly? This is the mammalian brain that we talk about. And there's a direct pathway to the emotional response. Okay? Someone's yelling at me, and I'm just going to hit them. Or I'm going to hit, what was it, with the newspaper? And then there's the way to the cortex. Okay? All right, so keeping this model in mind is really important. The relay system, it's like a valence. Is there a stampede of elephants coming at me? Do I need to run out of the way? And when the body goes into that mode, this is all pre-conscious, right? So we're not consciously aware of what's going on in that limbic system. So not really controlled. So I like the elevator model. I like to take people to the elevator of emotions. If the limbic system says trouble, access to learning shuts down. Okay, if something else is going on with this kid, and we talk about shutdown in the classroom. How many of you have heard that term, shutdown? Okay, shutdown. The elevator ain't working. Okay? The limbic system says, great, we're good. We can get to the creativity and the imagination, the curiosity and the knowledge we want to get to. This is so important. All right, so we have the bottom, the mechanisms for arousal, the middle level interpreter, and the top cortices. The cortices is where learning and memory takes place. It's what we want to engage. So this is for psychologists. If you psychologists out there, this is the I-think model, but it's been interpreted many different ways. I know that it's been brought into teacher learning and education training. But we need some level of stress, right? We need we can't be totally asleep or apathetic, right? In order to be engaged for optimal learning. I like to use the example of the concert pianist or the violinist who has to get out there. Any person who's in the theater knows all about this. When the system goes awry, okay, you can get to such levels of anxiety and distress that you get to stage fright point. We're not doing well there. That's totally unperforming. You're not going on stage. But you can also be at the point of underperformance because you're just like, yeah. That's like you haven't boosted the system up. And we see this when we talk about going with the flow from one to the other. We need to be in a state of relaxed alertness. And most of us can handle this. We can go through, someone dying in our lives, as you heard that example, and they make it through. Some of us can't, okay? And some of us can't go through the day-to-day stresses without, here we go. Relaxed alertness. Yes. Okay. That's where we want to be in terms of our stress. I love this model. It's a little curve. It's something to keep in mind in terms of the valence of emotion and of keeping things in balance. This is complex, actually. This is not easy to do, to keep everybody at this point, but it's important to keep in mind. Now, you heard about the brain changes when you learn things. Squire and Kendall, I actually got to see a conference with Eric Kendall showing me how 8 neurons in a snail, learning through, that's how the evidence of what we do. The snail actually, the neurons change, and we know that our neurons actually change from learning. When the snail learns, those neurons change. It's kind of cool. Anyway, the brain chemistry changes in response to stress. We're learning this. We're learning about cortisol levels and how damaging they are to our bodies. You know, we're learning about this for ourselves as adults. We've got to think about this for the classroom, okay? When you're in survival-oriented behavior, when you think there's a herd of wildebeests coming at you, you're not going to be thinking about much but running, okay? And your body's going to have that threat-stress response. I'm not saying that, but sometimes it's perception in children who have these wide shifts in terms of their arousal levels. Don't look at me that way! They get all defensive, and then it creates a cycle, because that kind of defensiveness is not going to be something that's tolerated by other people. And defense mechanisms is that the brain is on alert. Again, subconscious. It's good for survival, bad for learning. Doesn't get us to the cortices. So important to think about that. So we need to focus on joy, pleasure, anticipation, and curiosity. Those are words I want to leave you with thinking about. How do we get those to be the adjectives we think of in terms of what emotions we want to evoke in our classroom environments or our home environments? Now, there's a number of different ways you can modify arousal levels. This is just a very basic. It comes from actually Bauman Owen's book, Gifted. What's the title of the book again? Do you guys remember? You all know it, yeah? To be gifted and learning disabled. Thank you. I didn't want to missay it. The type of activity that you're doing, right? Whether or not you're doing something with motion or you're doing a group activity or not, how the students are participating, the tempo or pace that you take.